Get your dirty hands off my table, Richard Hartwell snapped as Maxine Waters reached to refill his water glass at Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant. The tech billionaire shoved her hand away, sending water across his equations scrawled on expensive napkins. Look what you've done, he rose, looming over her. That proof had baffled top researchers for months. Hartwell held up the soaked napkin for others to see. Solve this. I'll give you everything I own. He scoffed at his own challenge, then swept his arm across the table. Salt, pepper, and crystal shattered on the marble. Now clean it up. That's what your people are good for. As Maxine knelt amid the glass, she memorized every number on the sodden napkins. While he publicly humiliated her, she quietly worked through what he called impossible. 3 blocks away at Lincoln Center's Avery Fisher Hall, the 15th annual $1 Million Math Challenge buzzed with anticipation. Tonight, Billionaire sponsors presented their toughest unsolved problems to top mathematicians for large cash prizes. The rules were simple. Solve a sponsor's problem and win the associated prize. These weren't routine puzzles. They were cutting-edge research questions tied to patents and breakthroughs. For 15 years, Richard Hartwell had been the undefeated head judge. His reputation was earned. He'd solved variations of Fermat-style problems and built a tech empire on algorithms that transformed AI. Tonight felt different. The stakes were higher. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Sarah Carter announced from the podium, this year's prize pool exceeds $50 million. Applause followed. Contestants included PhD mathematicians from Harvard, MIT, Cambridge, and Oxford. Cameras rolled for a live global broadcast. Mathematical genius would air to 300 million viewers. Back at the restaurant, Maxine finished mopping Hartwell's mess. Her manager, Yeppe, gripped her arm. You stay invisible tonight, he hissed. VIPs decide if this place survives. One mistake and you're fired. Maxine nodded. She needed the job. Her grandmother's medical bills and lingering MIT student loans left no room for risk. 3 years earlier, she'd been 1 semester from a mathematics doctorate when life intervened. Her father's construction accident, her mother's medication costs, and her younger brother's autism therapy added up to an impossible choice. She left MIT for family. Her published work in topology had impressed professors. A thesis advisor predicted a Nobel someday. That mattered little now as she cleared tables of guests who'd never know her past. As she worked, snippets of nearby conversation floated over. Hartwell's challenge is supposed to be impossible, a woman in diamonds murmured. Infinite sequences and convergence theory. My husband's team spent 2 years on it, another replied. They call it the convergence paradox. No solution exists. Maxine paused, hands on wine glasses. Convergence theory. Her undergraduate thesis had covered patterns in infinite series, and her mind began running through approaches. Years of training surfaced automatically. More murmurs. The preliminary problems were warm-ups. Hartwell always saved his impossible proof for last. The man was never wrong. Something familiar stirred in Maxine. Not anger, but recognition of the quiet certainty that follows mathematical clarity. She'd felt it in MIT's library late nights solving problems that baffled advisors. She also knew brilliance didn't require credentials. It sometimes lived in overlooked minds. Her phone alerted the $1 Million Math Challenge would start in 1 hour. Lincoln Center's doors would open to the public, broadcasting in the lobby. Yeppe reappeared. Table 12 needs their check. Move. Maxine moved, mentally calculating 43 minutes left on her shift. Lincoln Center was a 12-minute walk. The preliminary round started in 55 minutes. Could she step from shadow to spotlight and let her skills be seen? Her shift ended 3 minutes ago. She unknotted her apron in the back alley. Lincoln Center's lights called from 12 blocks away. Each step felt monumental. She wasn't supposed to be here. The competition wasn't for servers. But Hartwell's soggy napkin was folded in her pocket. His equations were etched in her memory. She'd spotted his error within 30 seconds. A sign convention mistake in the 7th equation that undermined his entire framework. The man who'd humiliated her had missed something embarrassingly basic. But she was a dropout and a waitress. Who would take her seriously? Inside Lincoln Center's lobby, crowds watched giant screens. Maxine slipped through, her uniform drawing dismissive looks. On screen, Dr. Sarah Carter introduced the final 3, Dr. Marcus Webb, Harvard, Dr. Elena Kowalski, Oxford, and Dr. James Lau, MIT. a former classmate who completed the program she'd left. Before we begin the final challenge, Dr. Carter said, Mr. Hartwell would like to address our global audience. The camera found Hartwell immaculate, holding a sheet of dense equations. Tonight I present the convergence paradox, he announced. My team has spent 3 years on this proof. It shows certain infinite sequences cannot converge under any known framework. The audience leaned in. Hartwell's confidence was absolute. This proof has been verified by teams at Stanford, Caltech, and Princeton. It defines the limit of current mathematical understanding. He paused. If anyone in this room finds even the smallest error, I will personally give them everything I own. My companies, properties, my entire fortune. $50 billion, the crowd gasped. Social media ignited. The event had become the bet of the century. Maxine's heart raced. Hartwell's napkin burned in her pocket. She knew precisely where his proof failed. A sign convention flip in the 7th equation that invalidated his claims. But she was nobody. Dr. Carter stepped forward with legal documents. Mr. Hartwell, this is highly unusual. Are you certain? Hartwell's certainty didn't waver. Absolutely. I am willing to stake everything because mathematics doesn't lie, and neither do I. He signed the legal guarantee on live television. What began as a competition turned into a public test of pride. In the lobby, Maxine made a choice and pushed toward the auditorium. A security guard blocked her. This area is for registered contestants and VIPs only. Maxine's voice was steadier than she felt. I need to speak with Dr. Carter. It's about a mathematical proof. The guard laughed. Half the crowd thought they could solve million-dollar problems, and that's not how it worked. Dr. Carter, however, noticed the disturbance. She'd learned to recognize genuine mathematical intuition, which usually arrived without fanfare. Dr. Carter approached. Maxine produced Hartwell's soggy napkin. There's an error in equation 7 of the convergence paradox, she said. The sign convention switches from positive to negative iteration without justification. The auditorium fell quiet. 300 million viewers watched as a woman in a server's uniform challenged the nation's most confident mathematician. Dr. Carter examined the napkin. The margins showed elegant derivations and shortcuts many graduate students would miss. Where did you study? She asked. MIT, 3 years of the doctoral program. Maxine's voice faded, but the reason no longer mattered. Hartwell's laughter echoed through the hall. Security, remove this delusional woman at once. I don't have time for attention seekers. Dr. Carter raised her hand. Mr. Hartwell, she's identified a specific error. As the competition director, I'm obligated to verify any formal challenge. This is absurd, Hartwell snapped. That woman was serving me coffee 2 hours ago. She probably can't balance a checkbook, let alone grasp advanced mathematics. The audience murmured. Many had seen her at the restaurant. The irony was sharp. The same woman he'd humiliated was now challenging his mathematical authority. Dr. Carter turned to the main display. Miss Waters, Maxine Waters, please explain your objection to equation 7. Maxine's hands trembled slightly as she stepped to the microphone. The vast auditorium stretched before her like a sea of judgment. Yet mathematics had always been her refuge, a world where logic mattered more than appearances. In equation 7, Mr. Hartwell assumes positive iteration while defining the convergence boundary. She began, her voice gaining steadiness. But in step 12, he switches to negative iteration without adjusting the asymptotic behavior. Taking a marker, she approached the whiteboard beside the screen. If the iteration remains positive, the limit approaches positive infinity along this path. Her hand moved smoothly across the board, outlining equations and curves. However, negative iteration shifts the convergence entirely. The true limit approaches 2.847, not 0 as his proof claims. The 3 PhD contestants exchanged uncertain looks. Dr. Webb from Harvard reached for his calculator. Dr. Kowalski from Oxford began running simulations on her laptop. Dr. Liu from MIT studied the equations carefully. She's correct, Dr. Liu murmured into his mic. The asymptotic behavior changes completely under negative iteration. Dr. Carter quickly confirmed the computation on her tablet. Her expression shifted from surprise to admiration. Her correction is mathematically valid. Hartwell's face reddened. Impossible. My team spent 3 years on this. It was reviewed by Stanford, Caltech, Princeton. Sometimes, Maxine said quietly. The simplest mistakes are hardest to see when you're too close to the problem. The audience erupted. Social media lit up with clips of the unknown waitress correcting a billionaire. The hashtag #WaitressGenius began trending globally. Hartwell tried to recover. Anyone can spot arithmetic errors. That doesn't make her a mathematician. This was luck, Dr. Carter shook her head. This wasn't arithmetic. Miss Waters identified a fundamental conceptual flaw in convergence theory. Her correction introduces a new approach to infinite series analysis. The three PhDs huddled together, already sketching out variations of her insight. What she revealed in 30 seconds was reshaping their understanding of problems they'd studied for years. Additionally, Dr. Carter continued, her notation indicates advanced training, techniques well beyond undergraduate level. For the first time in 15 years, Hartwell's confidence faltered. My team will need to verify this independently. Of course, Dr. Carter agreed. But under competition rules, a valid objection automatically advances the challenger to the next round. The crowd held its breath. Maxine had passed the first test, but tougher challenges awaited. Hartwell's glare hardened. Fine, if this woman thinks she's brilliant, let's see how she handles real problems. Dr. Carter, present the secondary challenges. Dr. Carter turned to Maxine. Miss Waters, are you prepared to enter the formal competition? The next three problems increased significantly in complexity. Maxine looked out over the audience, a mix of doubt, curiosity, and hostility. Yet scattered among them were faces filled with quiet hope. People who had been dismissed, underestimated, or ignored. I'm ready, she said simply. As Dr. Carter prepared the next challenge, Hartwell's expression darkened. This wasn't about math anymore. It was about punishing the woman who had embarrassed him before the world. Could a former MIT dropout endure what was coming next? Dr. Carter lifted her hand to silence the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, we have an unprecedented situation. Miss Waters has successfully identified a fundamental error in tonight's primary challenge. The camera zoomed in on Maxine, still holding the marker beside the whiteboard. Her server's uniform looked out of place in the formal setting, but her mathematics spoke louder than appearances. According to competition rules, Dr. Carter continued, any challenger who identifies valid errors in preliminary proofs advances to the main competition. Hartwell stepped forward, barely containing his anger. Dr. Carter, I demand verification of her credentials. This woman doesn't belong here. My business, Maxine replied steadily, is mathematics, and mathematics doesn't care about uniforms. The crowd roared with applause. Social media erupted again with the mathematics doesn't care trending alongside waitress genius. Hartwell sneered. Fine. If you want to play this game, let's raise the stakes. He gestured toward his lawyers, typing furiously. Dr. Carter, I'm officially modifying my challenge. Mr. Hartwell, that's highly irregular, she cautioned. I'm doubling my wager, he announced, his voice echoing through the hall. $100 billion. Everything I own plus my company's assets. But now she must solve 3 problems, not 1, in 60 minutes total. Gasps filled the auditorium. The 3 PhDs looked stunned. This was no longer an academic contest. It was intellectual warfare. Dr. Carter scanned her tablet for regulatory details. The rules permit modified challenges if all parties consent. I accept, Maxine said before she could finish. You don't know what you're agreeing to, Dr. Webb warned. These are unsolved research problems teams have studied for years. But Maxine's focus never left Hartwell. She recognized that same arrogant certainty, the one he'd worn when he'd crushed her dignity in the restaurant. Furthermore, Hartwell said, sensing advantage, this event will be broadcast live to every major network, CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera. The world will watch her fail. Dr. Carter's voice softened. Miss Waters, you are not required to accept these new terms. The original challenge still stands. No, Maxine said firmly. I accept all of them. The audience count surged past 500 million as the world tuned in. In restaurants, homes, and classrooms, people gathered around screens, especially those who knew what it felt like to be overlooked. Back at Leonard's, Yeppe and the kitchen staff huddled around a tablet. She's insane, he muttered. That man will destroy her. But across the world, in hospitals, night shifts, and community centers, people watched with newfound belief. Dr. Carter faced the cameras. The new rules are as follows. 3 problems, 60 minutes total. Miss Waters will work at the main board. The existing contestants will compete simultaneously for comparison. And when she fails, Hartwell said with a cold smile, I want her to publicly admit that she's nothing more than a fraud chasing attention. She'll apologize to every viewer for wasting their time. The cruelty in his demand shocked the audience. Even his supporters appeared uneasy at the added humiliation clause. And if I succeed? Kesha asked calmly. Hartwell laughed dismissively. You won't. But suppose I do, she pressed. His lawyers tried signaling him to stop, but arrogance had already taken over. If you somehow manage to solve all 3 problems, and which is mathematically impossible, then yes, you get everything. The full 100 billion and a public apology from me. Contracts were rewritten in haste and signed under the bright studio lights. Cameras were adjusted for perfect coverage. Across the world, social media platforms struggled to keep up as millions tuned in to witness the challenge. During setup, Dr. Carter approached Kesha privately. Are you sure about this? There's no shame in competing under the original terms. There's shame, Kesha replied quietly, in staying silent while someone believes they can humiliate you without consequence. I've stayed quiet long enough. Technicians completed the final camera checks. Hartwell stood once more before the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced confidently, you're about to see the difference between true mathematical brilliance and desperate self-delusion. Watch closely as this woman humiliates herself before the entire world. But Kesha's demeanor had changed. Her once trembling hands were now steady, her uncertain voice replaced with calm confidence. She walked toward the large whiteboard like a pianist approaching her instrument. The timer was set. The sealed envelopes lay ready. 500 million viewers held their breath. Could the woman once tasked with cleaning up Hartwell's messes now clean up his mathematics as well? A loud tone signaled the start of the 60-minute countdown echoing through Lincoln Center. Dr. Carter opened the first envelope, revealing Problem 1, Advanced Probability Theory with Quantum Applications. Kesha scanned the page once, twice, and then she smiled. The PhD contestants had already begun scribbling equations at a furious pace, but she stood still for nearly half a minute, quietly mapping out the mathematical terrain in her mind. While Dr. Webb from Harvard struggled with the opening framework, Kesha spotted a graceful shortcut. Instead of grinding through 17 variables, she recognized the problem as a disguised Markov chain. Her marker glided smoothly across the board, cutting through complexity with effortless precision. The audience leaned forward. Even Hartwell seemed momentarily impressed. Online, however, the reaction was harsh. Social media erupted with anonymous criticism. Fake waitress gets lucky. This is scripted. She's getting answers through an earpiece. The hostility spread fast. Meanwhile, Yeppe from Leiden University fielded endless media calls. She was always odd, he told reporters. Always muttering numbers, scribbling on napkins. We thought she wasn't quite stable. Dr. Carter opened the second envelope. Problem 2. Topological manifolds and differential geometry. This was Kesha's area of expertise from her MIT days. Her undergraduate paper on manifold theory had been described as groundbreaking. Her method was so unconventional that Dr. Kowalski from Oxford paused her own calculations to watch. She's applying Riemann mapping in reverse, whispered Dr. Liu into his microphone. That's actually brilliant. Cameras zoomed in to capture the astonished faces of the PhD participants. Kesha was thinking far beyond textbook limits, exploring mathematical pathways others hadn't considered. Sensing an opportunity, Hartwell turned to the crowd with feigned sympathy. Ladies and gentlemen, I've learned something troubling about our challenger during the break, he announced smoothly. Miss Williams was expelled from MIT for academic misconduct. The false accusation hit Kesha hard. She staggered, nearly dropping her marker. The audience murmured in confusion. That's not true, she said softly, but her voice barely carried. My sources at MIT confirm it, Hartwell pressed. Plagiarism. That's why she never completed her doctorate. Across the country, living rooms filled with doubt. The story felt almost too cinematic to believe. Could a former waitress truly solve problems that baffled top PhDs? Dr. Carter intervened firmly. Mr. Hartwell, unless you have documentation, such claims are inappropriate. She turned to Kesha's board. Miss Williams, your approach to topology here is truly innovative. I've never seen this mapping method before. Her validation steadied Kesha's resolve. Mathematics at least didn't lie. But the public narrative was spiraling. News headlines screamed, "Mystery mathematicians troubled past." Talk shows speculated whether the entire event was a rating stunt. A Yale professor declared on CNN, "No one jumps from serving coffee to solving frontier-level problems. The human brain just doesn't work that way." With 27 minutes left, 2 problems were complete, barely. Kesha concluded, problem 2 with precision so elegant that the other contestants broke into spontaneous applause. Even they recognized genuine mathematical beauty. Behind the scenes, Hartwell's lawyers scrambled. "We're hearing her solutions may be pre-programmed," one announced loudly for the cameras. This speed suggests prior knowledge or external assistance. Security began inspecting the stage for hidden devices, fueling suspicion. The tension grew unbearable. Multiple camera feeds captured every angle as the global audience swelled to 700 million viewers. Hashtags "A Math Genius" and "Waitress Fraud" trended side by side. Dr. Carter opened the final envelope. Problem 3. The Infinite Bridge Paradox. Hartwell's own creation, one that had confounded research teams for years. Kesha studied it once, and something clicked. It wasn't one problem at all, it was 3 interconnected ones. Number theory, topology, and convergence analysis, cleverly woven together. Then disaster struck. Her calculator went dark. "Technical issues happen," Hartwell said with mock sympathy. "Perhaps we should pause until she finds a working calculator." The audience split. Some shouted, "Let her work," while others demanded verification of her identity. "I don't need a calculator," Kesha declared firmly. "Mathematics existed long before machines." She turned to the whiteboard and began calculating purely by hand, her mind processing numbers with the precision of a musician reading complex scores. As the clock ticked down to 8 minutes, exhaustion began to show. The pressure was immense. Global doubt, personal attacks, and the physical toll of mental exertion. Hartwell sensed weakness. "This is what happens," he sneered, "when desperation meets reality. Watch her collapse under pressure she was never built to handle." 7 minutes left. No tools, no allies. 700 million people watching. But as Kesha faced the infinite bridge paradox, the noise faded. The cameras, the taunts, the doubt all disappeared. Only mathematics remained, pure, logical, and eternal. She saw it. The connection among all 3 problems. Hartwell's team had failed because they'd treated it as one impossible riddle instead of 3 harmonious puzzles. The solution required not brute calculation but vision, the ability to see patterns where others saw chaos. Her marker began to move again, steady, confident, purposeful. She wasn't scribbling now. She was composing. 6 minutes remaining. The final challenge had begun. Could intuition defeat computational dominance and prejudice? At 5 minutes, Dr. Carter received an urgent alert on her tablet. Her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice firm but calm, "I've just received an update from the International Mathematics Consortium. They have an immediate statement regarding tonight's competition." The room fell silent. "The infinite bridge paradox," Dr. Carter continued, "was never meant to be solved using traditional mathematics. Documents from MIT, Cambridge, and Princeton confirm it was created as part of a research program to identify mathematicians capable of intuitive pattern synthesis, the ability to perceive relationships that computational methods cannot." Gasps rippled through the audience. Even the PhD contestant stopped writing. Hartwell's face turned pale. "This revelation was never part of his plan," Dr. Carter went on, her tone steady and clear. "Furthermore, the consortium disclosed that Mr. Hartwell's own solution, developed over 3 years, had depended heavily on quantum computing and AI-assisted pattern recognition. No mathematician in history had ever solved this particular problem through manual calculation alone." The auditorium fell silent as 700 million viewers realized the entire competition had just changed. "This means," Dr. Carter stated carefully, "Miss Williams is attempting something never before achieved in modern mathematics. She's working on a problem designed specifically to require computational technology, without any assistance at all." Hartwell stepped forward, unease creeping into his tone. "Dr. Carter, this announcement is highly inappropriate. The competition's rules were clear. Actually, Mr. Hartwell, Dr. Carter replied evenly. The consortium's letter indicates you were aware of the problem's special classification when you selected it. The question now is whether it was ethical to present an unsolvable challenge without disclosure. The revelation hit like a shockwave. Hartwell hadn't merely been arrogant. He had knowingly presented an impossible problem, one that required technology to solve, ensuring his opponent's failure. Yet Keisha Williams remained at the board, absorbed in her calculations. With just 4 minutes remaining, she was attempting something humanity had never accomplished. The audience no longer saw a contest. They were witnessing someone pushing the boundaries of human potential. The realization struck Keisha hard. Her marker froze midair. The challenge she'd been solving for nearly an hour wasn't just complex. It was designed to be unsolvable by human minds. Dr. Carter's words echoed in her thoughts. Around her, the PhD contestants had stopped working. Dr. Webb from Harvard sighed. If it needs quantum computing, there's no point. Dr. Kowalski from Oxford shut her notebook. Even Dr. Liu from MIT, who'd admired Keisha's originality, stepped back. Social media sentiment turned swiftly. She was set up. Hartwell planned this from the start. No one can beat an impossible problem. Sympathy replaced curiosity. With 3 minutes and 40 seconds on the clock, Keisha stared at her equations. Everything she'd written, her intricate links between number theory, topology, and convergence analysis, suddenly felt futile. If technology was required, then her insights were meaningless. The silence in the auditorium shifted from anticipation to empathy. Dr. Carter approached softly. Miss Williams, given this new information, no one would fault you for stopping. What you've achieved tonight is already exceptional. Keisha looked out at the audience. Yeppe from Le Bernardin was smirking through a live video feed, probably mocking her downfall. Hartwell's lawyers were on their phones, preparing statements to defend their client's commitment to mathematical integrity. But what broke her was the faces of those who had believed in her. The night shift workers, single mothers, students told they weren't good enough. I can't do it, she whispered. I thought I saw the solution, but if it's impossible... Her confidence collapsed. She felt like nothing more than a foolish waitress who had tried to compete with billionaires and scholars. Sensing victory, Hartwell seized the moment. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what happens when fantasy meets fact. Miss Williams has been living a delusion, believing that serving coffee qualifies her to solve what the world's brightest cannot. The cruelty in his tone was unmistakable. This was no longer about math, it was about humiliation. Then quietly but firmly, Dr. Carter spoke. Keisha, the cameras fell silent. Mathematics doesn't care about classifications, titles, or what's considered impossible. You saw something here no one else did. Trust yourself. She pointed to the board. Look again. You haven't been solving 3 problems, you've been creating something new. Through tears, Keisha looked up. Dr. Carter was right. Her equations weren't separate. They formed bridges between fields that had never been connected. Maybe the real problem wasn't her lack of technology, but everyone else's limited way of thinking. With 2 minutes and 15 seconds left, she turned back to the board. Her movements regained confidence. The infinite bridge paradox wasn't about finding one solution. It was about forming a new mathematical language to describe infinity itself. I see it now, she murmured. Her marker began to move with steady rhythm. While Hartwell's team had spent years using machines, she had been creating something far more profound. Discovery through intuition. The first bridge linked number theory with topology, where others saw separate infinite sequences. Keisha saw them as points on a continuous surface. Her hand swept across the board, sketching curves that visualized infinity as a geometric landscape. She's treating infinity like terrain, whispered Dr. Liu, astonished. Not as abstraction, but as a space one can explore. The second bridge joined topology with convergence analysis. Instead of proving convergence by limits, Keisha showed how mathematical functions could flow like rivers across the surfaces she'd drawn. Even viewers with little mathematical background could see the elegance in her approach. Hartwell, desperate, interrupted. This isn't mathematics, it's illustration. She's drawing pictures, not proofs. Keisha paused and faced him calmly. Your elegant solution has one flaw, Mr. Hartwell, she said. You assumed infinity is always infinite. Hartwell frowned, then paled as she continued. In your quantum model, you treated all infinities as equal. But there are kinds. Countable, uncountable, convergent, divergent. The key is that they're all connected. 90 seconds left. She turned back to complete the third bridge, the synthesis uniting all three mathematical domains into one framework. Her equations flowed seamlessly, intuition guiding her every line. Dr. Carter whispered, "She's creating a unified theory for infinite sequences." The other contestants simply watched in awe. Cameras zoomed in as the whiteboard filled with interconnected formulas and diagrams, a complete, coherent solution. "There," Kesha said finally. "The infinite bridge paradox isn't a paradox. It's a map showing how different infinities relate." The timer hit 0. Silence. Dr. Carter ran digital verification tests, cross-checking every line. After several tense moments, she turned to the audience. "The reasoning is valid and revolutionary. Ms. Williams has established a new framework for analyzing infinite series." Applause erupted. Hartwell, however, refused to yield. "One professor's opinion doesn't prove validity. I demand independent confirmation." "Already done," Dr. Carter replied. "I've submitted her work to MIT, Stanford, Princeton, Cambridge, and Oxford." Moments later, messages began to arrive. MIT, paradigm-shifting advancement. Recommend immediate publication. Stanford, validated. Potential applications to quantum field theory. Then Princeton. Then Cambridge. Then Oxford. Every institution confirmed it. Kesha Williams had solved the impossible. Facing the cameras, she said quietly, "The beautiful thing about mathematics is, it doesn't care who you think deserves to be right." The room went silent again. This wasn't just victory. It was the triumph of truth over ego, talent over prejudice, brilliance over status. Hartwell, the man who'd spent 15 years at the top, now faced undeniable defeat. His empire of superiority crumbled before a woman he'd tried to humiliate. For once, arrogance met genius and lost. Before he could respond, Dr. Carter's tablet pinged with another message. "The International Patent Office has contacted us," she announced. Miss Williams's method has potential applications beyond mathematics: quantum computing, AI optimization, and cryptographic systems. Estimated intellectual property value $200 billion. The auditorium exploded with noise, reporters shouting, cameras flashing. Hartwell turned pale. His own technology empire depended on algorithms her discovery had just rendered obsolete. Dr. Carter raised her hand for silence. "There's more. The Mathematical Consortium confirms this event was also a recruitment initiative. Miss Williams, they're inviting you to lead a new institute for intuitive mathematics with full global funding." It hit everyone at once. This had never been a competition, it had been a test. And the waitress from hours ago had become the most sought-after mathematician in the world. Finally, the moment of truth. All eyes turned to Hartwell. Would he admit defeat or find a way to escape accountability? After a long pause, he approached the board, studying her work silently. Minutes passed. When he turned back, the arrogance was gone. "Miss Williams," he said quietly, "your solution is correct, completely correct. You've demonstrated a level of insight I failed to recognize. I built my career on being right. Today I've learned the value of being wrong with dignity." The audience erupted in applause. 6 months later, Dr. Kesha Williams stood in her new office at the Institute for Intuitive Mathematics. Her walls were lined not with awards, but photos of students she was helping to inspire. On her desk sat one framed memento, Hartwell's napkin. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder that genius often begins in places no one expects. The final scene showed her teaching a diverse classroom, writing equations with the same calm confidence. Above the board read, "Mathematics doesn't care about your uniform. It only cares about your courage to see what others cannot." Have you ever been underestimated because of how you look or where you work? Share your story in the comments below.